Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of debate on whether the First Amendment should protect violent video games from being sold and distributed to children under the age of 18. A violent video game is defined as a game involving killing, maiming, dismembering, or sexually assaulting an image of a human being. As many of us know, the First Amendment prohibits the making of any law respecting an establishment of religion, impeding the free exercise of religion, abridging the freedom of speech, infringing on the freedom of the press, interfering with the right to peacefully assemble, or prohibiting the petitioning for governmental redress of grievances. There haven't been Supreme Court cases in the past involving video games quite like this, but in 2000, Ashcroft versus American Civil Liberties Union displayed a message to the government that says it really doesn't have any power to restrict the expression because of its message, its ideas, or its subject matter involving its content. A second example would be United States versus Playboy Entertainment Group in 2000, where the Supreme Court ruled that the moral judgments about art and literature are for the individual to make, not for the government to decree, even with mandate or approval of a majority. These past cases really paved the way for the major case that we'll be looking at, which is Brown v. EMA, which took place in 2011. The Supreme Court would eventually strike down the law from California, which wanted to prevent the sale of games involving the killing, maiming, dismembering, or sexually assaulting of a human being in that specific video game. The Supreme Court acknowledged California's concern in protecting children under the age of 18 from playing these games, but said that the First Amendment has set limits and that these limits were not met. The court reaffirmed core First Amendment principles, noting that the government cannot limit messages, ideas, or content. There are narrow exceptions to freedom of speech involving obscenity and incitement, but new restrictions must have a historical basis and can't simply be imposed on emerging media. Now, we have to remember that entertainment is protected by the First Amendment, and that the court noted that although video games are primarily intended for entertainment, and I quote, "We have long recognized that it is difficult to distinguish politics from entertainment, and it is dangerous to try." Sexual and violent content are viewed very differently here in America, and we have a long tradition of limiting and depicting sexual acts, but we've never really been restrictive about violence. And this has really started at a young age when we have showed and read, young children, books that depict acts of violence. One of the prime examples in this is Grimm's Fairy Tales, which shows extreme acts of violence and is actually very grim, to be very frank with you. As new technologies are invented, states cannot target them for restriction because of concern about potential influences on children. In this case specifically, the court concluded that the interactive nature of video games did not warrant government action any more than compelling literature would. The science behind this also does not prove violence carries over from video games. The Supreme Court dismissed research that violence poses a threat to children, saying that it doesn't prove that violent video games cause children to act aggressively. Justice Samuel Alito also did some of his very own research during this case, where he would share his findings in court. He said that all of these disgusting video games are supposed to disgust us, but disgust is not a valid basis for restricting expression. People are going to think that because violent video games show the killing and other acts of violence, to other people, that these children are going to become violent themselves, when in fact that sports such as football and other contact sports show us that people are intending to hurt other people. That's the whole goal for these sports like wrestling and all these things where violence is seen as entertainment. So to show killing and things that are fake, not real whatsoever, and then to say that this could be a case of more violence than a violent sport where you are actually hurting another human being. That's hard to dispute against when things like this occur. I have never seen a news story or anything of the sorts where someone has been motivated by a video game to go out in the real world and actually hurt someone. But on the contrary, it seems like every other week or every year we see a football player, a wrestler, a UFC fighter who are violent by nature and violent for their profession, who get paid for these things. They are involved in a sexual assault. They're involved in something, a fight in the street. They're getting arrested for violent acts because of their violent sport. This is, I think, and I think it is obvious to see, is more of a problem in real life than in a virtual reality world. Lastly, I believe that violent video games are protected by the First Amendment and will be forever. They are a form of entertainment. They are a form of art in a way. People express themselves through these. Um, it's not for the government to decide if the parents of a child and those parents are okay with their kid playing these games. Some of them do have history. They're historically accurate, dating back to the World Wars. It is not up to the state to decide whether um, games should be mandated by age. Uh, I will say though that games themselves do set age limits. You know, are those always exercised correctly? No, but the government cannot proceed over them because of the First Amendment and because of what it stands for.